Okay, continue here. Sally shook her head and said, "This is unbelievable. I feel like I'm in some kind of bad dream I hope I wake up from." Sally then asked, "You mentioned the government. You think the government made some of those anti-Muslim people, anti-Islam people," corrected Daniel. Anti-Islam people. Well, you think they arrested them? Probably some of them, said Daniel. Questioning Muslims about Islam on the internet is not considered a hate crime. America is almost completely under Sharia law now. I knew this day was coming when, if you said Islam was responsible for bringing down the Willis Tower, you were called a racist and hateful by our president. By the way, it was the destruction of the Willis Tower that got Niles out of substitute teaching for a while and got him into trucking. For one thing, he lost his wife in the Willis Tower nuke attack. He had a bunch of CDs containing all the videos on the flash drive, along with some that weren't on the flash drive. And as revenge for what Islam had done to the love of his life and those other innocents in the Willis Tower, well, although his mother made him swear earlier to not toss them onto rooftops like he was planning earlier, he instead trucked all over America setting up these CDs containing data on how to question and destroy Islam. On the internet, he hid his face, but on CD and flash drive, he didn't. Whenever he stopped at a truck stop or rest area, he'd sneak a paper plate with the CD attached to it and place it on a sink or in the window of a restroom in the hopes he'd create his own sleeper cells that would one day be activated. He hoped by giving them a code he created, such activation could be achieved. But he's dead now, burned up in his house after getting back into substitute teaching. After reading his journal, I think I know where he went about it wrong with the paper plates and CDs. Sally remembered the paper plates and CDs she saw in the back of Daniel's sleeper's berth. She said, "But you are doing it, aren't you?" Daniel smiled and said, "Yes, I'm doing it, but I'm doing it different from the way he did it. In spite of the government's huge effort to brainwash the public into believing Islam is peaceful, tolerant, and the religion to believe and be a part of, and that terror is only caused by evil people in Muslim name only, well, many people deep down are smart enough to not buy it. Many, deep down, I believe, think Islam is a problem and that they are being lied to by the president and those in power. Slowly but surely, they are coming to believe, like me, that those in power are being paid huge amounts of Saudi money to only say Islam is peaceful and tolerant, to say that it's only a lot of evil people killing in the name of Allah to make Islam look bad. So, since there is a rational fear toward Islam in many, well, guess what I do that is different with those paper plates and CDs? What? Asked Sally. Well, Niles Neville used one paper plate. I used two. He taped one CD to one paper plate, and I put it on a restroom or in a rest stop fireplace or a barbecue stand, calling it Project Phoenix, thinking that instead of burning them up, one might take it home out of the ashes and play it. I used one CD and stick it. I use one CD and stick it and stick to I use one CD and stick to restrooms of rest and truck stops only. But after taping a CD to the inside of a paper plate, I put a marble with that CD and staple on another plate, sealing the marble inside a packet made of paper plates. Both plates have Arabic writing on the outside of them. And when I place them into a trucker restroom or a rest stop, and someone sees such an object with Arabic writing on it, well, if they don't think it's a bomb and pick it up, they might freak out when they discover something moving inside. If they freak out, well, hey, they might call the FBI, and who knows? I'm hoping that the FBI hasn't totally been bought off by Islam. That someone in the FBI will actually be brave enough to not think it's a kook job, but actually study what is on the CDs, see the great threat Islam poses with its Quran chapter 9, and if they do, well, if they do, maybe they can become like that David Vincent character in the old Invaders TV show, or that guy in the science fiction movie called They Live, and maybe, hopefully, they'll do something to stop Islam before everyone is forced to pull out a prayer rug and stick their patooties in the air 5 times a day, every day, for the rest of their lives, or else. Well, one can only hope. Sally just looked at the Pikachu doll in her hands. She shook her head slowly from side to side, thinking of all that Daniel said about it, then gave it back to him. Daniel said, "Pika, Pika," in a baby voice, and stuffed the Pikachu doll back where he had earlier pulled it from, all the while keeping an eye on the road. "I don't know what to say," she said, looking at the snowy road. "You sure you just don't hate Muslims?" Daniel laughed, then said, "I can't think of anyone I hate. No, I don't hate Muslims at all. Not even the ones trying now to kill me. To me, Muslims are only the symptoms of what threatens the world. They represent us all in the future if I fail at calling attention to Islam." So I looked down like she was in a lot of, like she was. Sally looked down like there was a lot on her mind. She then said, "But you have guns to shoot them, don't you?" "Yes, I do," said Daniel. "Of course, I'd never aim at anything vital on them. Well, I tried not to. I'm hoping that their ingrained indoctrination to believe anyone who isn't Muslim is so pure evil and would aim at their vitals that even though I'd make an effort to not kill them, they'd think I would. And hopefully they'd think twice about pulling what they pulled on me way back there. Way back there." Suddenly, Daniel spotted something that looked like it might be able to. Suddenly, Daniel spotted something that looked like he might be able to park the truck on. I hope that's ground for a truck. I once parked on the side of the road when my time was almost up, and it turned out to be soft ground, making it so my rig almost tipped over. I couldn't back up. I couldn't go forward. All I could do was sit in the driver's seat, hoping and praying a wind didn't kick up as I waited for a tow service. If this turns out to be the same, man, well, I'll have a lot of potatoes to pick up. Daniel stirred his rig onto the patch of snowy ground. The truck leaned, but not enough to become precarious. He then looked down and said, I might have to deploy the reflective triangles because the rig is still on the road. I don't dare risk taking it out any further on the shoulder like this, not after the last time. Yeah, I better set those triangles up here. It's truckers' luck to not set them up, then have someone deliberately hit you to get money out of you or your company, even if there doesn't seem to be anyone else on the road. So he asked, "Are you tired?" Daniel squinted his eyes and said, "I wouldn't be a true trucker if I wasn't always tired. No, I'm not too tired. Still, though, I have to get into the sleeper berth, even if I'm not tired. I'll let you have the top bunk where the heat still lingers. By the way, feel free to take my laptop and check out the videos I downloaded from the flash drive, now inside the Pikachu. There's a plug so you don't have to So you don't, there's a plug so you don't run down its batteries. By the way, I usually get the internet. If I fix it right, and you don't want to go through what I have on the flash drive, you can play internet chess or whatever. There are some videos on the internet that I feel shows the sub in action before he was hunted down and killed. Well, I'll be back. As Daniel went out to set up the three reflective triangles, Sally eyed Daniel's laptop. By the time the laptop screen was glowing with power, Daniel was back into the cab. He smiled as Sally looked at the icons. If you want to see all that was downloaded onto the flash drive before I download it into the laptop, go to my documents and look for a file called the Injil. The Injil is the name I gave it back. The Injil is the name I gave it, being that the Injil seems to be the main thing that will win the war on terror by destroying Islam. Injil? Asked Sally. Basically means the New Testament of the Bible. Injil is Quran for gospel. A Greek word, not Aramaic or even Arabic, but again, a Greek word for good news. Muhammad didn't realize it when he wrote the Quran that Jesus was never given a book in his Aramaic language called Injil. He wasn't given a book from God or Allah, period. Instead, Muhammad made the mistake, a huge mistake, of not knowing what the gospel was. He didn't realize that the New Testament was gospel to Christians. And since Muhammad took Jesus to being only a prophet, and since he wrote in the Quran that all prophets of Allah were supposedly given a book in their own language, well, he felt that the Gospel or New Testament was a book given to Jesus in his own language of Aramaic. So much so that Muhammad taught that the Gospel or Injil to be a holy book on par with the Quran, going so far as to be something that should be stood firm upon, because the Quran has Quran 568 telling Christians they have no ground to stand upon unless they stand firm upon the Injil gospel, which, believe it or not, opens a door up to the destruction of Islam and winning the war on terror. For the New Testament, well, Injil, is in total contradiction to the Quran, despite what the Quran says. They are like matter and antimatter. Yeah. They are like matter and antimatter. They totally destroy each other when you try to believe both confirm each other and combine them. Complete annihilation. They contradict each other. For the Injil gospel is all basically about Jesus and his work on the cross for those that believe that. And the Quran is basically all about working your way into what sounds like a slothful brothel in the sky, with Jesus just being a failed prophet. The most Quran-destroying weapon against the Quran is the very Quran itself. For the Quran says it's a confirmation and reminder that's what should be for it. In other words, the Quran is saying it's a confirmation of before scriptures, which is the Bible. The Quran even threatens Muslims with hell if they don't believe in all the books of Allah, which means they have to believe all of the Bible, and not just the Old Testament, Torah, and Psalms, 2 books the Quran mentions as previous scriptures written by Allah. Also, the Quran, that calls itself the clear signs handed down, says that it confirms whatever scripture that came before it. Can you imagine saying something so incredibly stupid? Anyway, if interested, you can look at the file called the Injil and learn the scriptures from the Quran and sayings from the Hadith that back up what I'm saying in video form. You can see the scriptures that right now I don't quite... You can see the scriptures that right now I don't quite have memorized in my head. Or you can check out other files if you find the whole thing boring. It just changed my life is all. It doesn't have to change yours. I better stop it right here.